This is the best gaming keyboard of all time. The Wooting 60HE was unlike any other mechanical keyboard because instead of using physical contacts to detect inputs, the 60HE does something completely different by using magnets. This not only made the keyboard incredibly fast, but because it can actually track how far you've pressed down a key, Wooting was able to release a feature that changed the entire gaming world. Rapid Trigger. This allowed players to register an input anywhere they want, and it was an absolute game changer for fast-paced games. But while the 60HE was unique performance-wise, the rest of the board left a lot to be desired. For the price of $180, the case was pure plastic, the keyboard itself looked really boring, and with thousands of magnetic keyboards coming out offering even more, it urgently needed an upgrade. So Wooting finally decided to drop the 60HE V2. But what has changed? Well, first off, the 60HE V2 finally has an option to come with an aluminum case. While the plastic case felt extremely sturdy and durable, it just didn't feel right having plastic as the case when the board is that expensive. Wooting also added the option to have a split spacebar with the V2, which give you extra keys for you to map to whatever you want. The left spacebar is actually a bit longer than the right one, so you don't accidentally hit the middle key while you're typing. Now this is really nitpicky, but I think the strap of the V1 is much better. But that's okay, because the V2 now has the ability to actually change the side of where the strap can be, and you can even have two straps at the same time. I don't know why you would ever want that, but hey, you can. But the biggest change to the keyboard's build is the fact that you can actually shake the PCB out of the case if you try hard enough. And that's because the V2 is now friction mounted. Instead of directly being screwed into the case, which helps reduce vibration. I love the 60HE's extremely easy modding process, but this makes it even less of a hassle. It's an amazing change, and the fact that the keyboard is also tape modded out of the factory is a really nice touch. Now what this does is actually make the keyboard sound a bit fuller and a bit deeper, which I think the V2 needed a little bit. The V2 by default now comes with a silicone block instead of foam inside the case for a clackier and sharper sound, but Wooting actually gives you a piece of foam inside the box so you can have that deeper sound if you want. What mainly makes the V2 different though are Wooting's new Lekker ticket switches. These switches wobble much less than the L60s, now have a closed bottom, and they made the spring longer so the initial force is heavy enough to prevent misclicks, but they also reduce the bottom out force so it's not as fatiguing. There are a few more changes of the V2, but Wooting has made a great in-depth video of all the changes made, so I will leave that in the description if you want to know more about it. But with all of these changes, how does a 60HE V2 sound? The difference between the silicone and the foam is very subtle, but the foam does give it a little bit of a more deeper sound. But overall, I think it just sounds great. These Lekker tickets are a blast to type on, and I think it's a huge upgrade in terms of feel compared to the L60s. A big complaint I had about the V1s is that the stabilizers aren't very good. They were rattly and not very well modded. And the V2s are slightly better, but not by much. They are still a bit rattly. What really made Wooting the go-to brand for gamers is of course their performance. And the 60HE V2 finally comes with 8000Hz polling rate and true 8000Hz polling rate. And the rapid trigger settings can also now go down to 0.1mm compared to 0.15. Now it's of course not as crazy as Mcho's 0.001mm size of a freaking bacteria, but let's be real. Who needs that? One thing Wooting does beat everyone at though is their software. And Wootility is by far the best keyboard software out there, and it's not even close. Everything is easy to use, there are no bugs, it's not a complete eyesore to look at, it even has an entire section to select and test your custom switches. It truly is exceptional, and I don't see how Wooting could have made this any better. I think it truly is a 10 out of 10 software. I of course got the 60HE for the rhythm game Mania, and for the longest time, I've ranked the Lekker L60s as the #1 switch for rhythm games. It's very heavy compared to most switches, but that gives you an insane amount of control. What makes this switch the reigning king is its perfect amount of bounce. Patterns like chord jacks and jump chills feel embarrassingly easy, and while you sacrifice a bit of stamina, the control, speed, and consistency are so much better than any other switch that it quite literally does not matter. The only reason why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 is the fact that it's just a nickel too heavy. If it bottomed out at something like 55 grams, it would have easily been the best switch for probably forever. And dude, the L60 is so wobbly. Just look at this. How did this pass? So I got really excited when I heard the Tickens bottom out at exactly 55 grams. And that lighter weight actually makes a world of difference. You don't lose stamina as much, and the switch is quite a bit smoother than the 60s, but not too much to the point where it feels mushy or has terrible bounce. And speaking of which, the bounce is very good. It's not as bouncy as the L60s unfortunately, but it's still enough to make it one of the best switches I've used for Mania. So much so that it's actually my main switch now. I think it's better than the L60 V2s for sure, which the ATHE has. That switch has too much lube and isn't as bouncy. But is it better than the original L60s? I actually don't know. I haven't used those in ages, and I ruined mine by over-lubing them, so I can't really compare. But for now, these are staying as my main switches for WrestleMania, and until I get a feel of the OGs again, these officially take the crown as my #1 switch for rhythm games. Oh! Oh! Okay, I'm done. Now for Geometry Dash, it's just one of the best switches I've tried. I think the 4mm distance make inputs feel less instant and take more effort than it should, but the bounce is great, and I think it's much better than the L60 V2s. I wouldn't say it's better than the Mount Ties, but it's very close, and the Tickens are probably my second favorite. So I've been using the 60HE V2 for about a month now, and I think I'm at a point where I can finally answer the question if this is becoming my new main keyboard. The 60HE V1 has been my daily driver for 2 years since I got it, until it recently got replaced by the much cheaper Aula Hero 68HE. And you're probably asking yourself, why would you switch to a keyboard that's so much cheaper? Well, my biggest complaint about the 60HE is it doesn't give you a lot for its price. Yes, this is the best keyboard I've used for WrestleMania, but for the price of $180, it's a huge letdown. And with magnetic keyboards at all price ranges constantly getting better, it makes the V1 honestly seem terrible value. Really think about it. What are you really missing out on if you go for a cheaper board like this or a little bit more of an expensive board like the MTROS A68 Turbo? They're both Hall effect. You're still getting rapid trigger because rapid trigger is rapid trigger. You still get custom actuation point, and with the A68 Turbo, you still get that aluminum case for a much cheaper price. Now, I assume most of you are not gonna mod your keyboard. You're probably just getting a keyboard for gaming. Most people just want a keyboard that works, and most people just want rapid trigger. The only thing that made the 60HE special is the fact that it popularized Hall effect and that it introduced rapid trigger. If it wasn't for that, it honestly wouldn't be very special. The 60HE V2 is definitely a step in the right direction. I think it's the easiest keyboard to mod, and because of its build changes, I think it's the best keyboard for enthusiasts. But like I said, most of you are not going to be modding your keyboard, and the V2 in default also comes in plastic, so if you want that aluminum case, that bumps the already insane price to $240. With all due respect, I see no keyboard being that worth it. That shit better make me 8 of that. And performance-wise, it's gonna be very identical to the V1. And the V2 still suffers from the same issues that the V1 did. The keycaps are the exact same, so it's still incredibly boring. I really don't understand this Wooting glaze that's going on. Now, you can argue all you want about it being the fastest keyboard or having the lowest of latencies, but the smallest of milliseconds, nobody will notice. I've already explained in my A68 Turbo video on how polling rate at some point doesn't really add on to your skill. Oh, but it's not true 8K polling rate. Oh, but it's not. And I know, Wooting's software is much better than any other software, but remember, the software is just a place to change your settings. You're not going to be spending most of your time there. You're going to be spending most of your time actually playing games. So if you have the V1 already, do not get the V2 expecting a big difference, if any at all. Remember, this is so piss easy to mod that you can just change the switches, get an aluminum case, and boom, you have a V2. But should you get the Wooting 60HE V2 if you don't have the V1? I don't know. There's no doubt that the V2 has made great improvements, but there's still so much room to grow. And with the insane hype it's getting, I am honestly quite disappointed. One thing for sure is that Wooting's Lekker Tickens are an absolute excellent switch for rhythm games. So if you have a magnetic keyboard already, just buy those switches and put them in. Like I said before, I think the 60HE V2 is also the safest option. Because don't get me wrong here, it's objectively a great keyboard. And disregarding its price, I doubt it will offend anyone. And I'm sure anybody would be very happy using this keyboard. Now, Wooting did send me over the 60HE V2 for a review, and I just want to take a moment to hugely thank them for this. But this is not sponsored, and everything I say is my own opinion. And that's also something you have to consider when buying a Wooting keyboard. The customer service is on point, the community is huge, so you're gonna be in good hands. I do like the 60HE V2, and it's the gaming keyboard I'd recommend to someone who is not willing to take the risk buying a cheaper keyboard, but it still has a very long way to go until I can truly crown it the best gaming keyboard. God bless.